Just 12 days after a suicide bomber killed 40 CRPF jawans in Pulwama, remember the JEM took responsibility for that attack. The Indian Air Force has carried out what it calls non-military preemptive strikes on terror camps across the line of control. India's Foreign Secretary said that the biggest Jaish training camp in Balakot has been hit and a large number of terrorists have in fact been eliminated. He also said that the airstrikes were absolutely necessary and added that the Jaish-e-Mohammed was in fact preparing for more terror attacks and hence this was a preemptive action. In response, Pakistan's foreign minister has termed the airstrikes as a grave aggression and said that there will be a befitting reply. In a statement after a security meeting chaired by Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, Pakistan has said it will respond at a time and place of its choosing. However, Pakistan has also denied India's claims of targeting a terror camp in Balakot, resulting in heavy casualties, calling it, and I quote again, a reckless and fictitious claim. Now, before we bring you a sequence of how the events have unfolded through this morning, here's India's Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale and Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi on the airstrikes.
In an intelligence-led operation in the early hours of today, India struck the biggest training camp of the Jaish-e-Mohammed in Balakot. In this operation, a very large number of Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorists, trainers, senior commanders, and groups of jihadis who were being trained for Fidaiin action were eliminated. This facility at Balakot was headed by Maulana Yusuf Azhar, alias Ustad Ghori, the brother-in-law of Masood Azhar, chief of the JEM. The government of India is firmly and resolutely committed to taking all necessary measures to fight the menace of terrorism. Hence, this non-military preemptive action was specifically targeted at the Jaish-e-Mohammed camp. The selection of the target was also conditioned by our desire to avoid civilian casualties. We expect that Pakistan lives up to its public commitment and takes follow-up action to dismantle all JEM and other camps and hold the terrorists accountable for their actions.
उन्होंने आज पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ जहरियत की है। नंबर एक, ये लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल की वायलेशन है, इसको मैं लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल की वायलेशन तस्वर करता हूं और पाकिस्तान एक मुनासिब जवाब का हक और राइट टू सेल्फ डिफेंस रखता है।
Well, that is the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, and you heard the Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale detailing the action by India. Let me now run you through how the events have unfolded since the wee hours this morning. Now, according to government sources, 12 Mirage fighter jets left the Gwalior base with laser-guided bombs at 3:30 this morning. At about 3:45 this morning, the Indian Air Force struck the Jaish-e-Mohammed terror camp in Balakot. Now, there was a lot of confusion through the morning on which Balakot, but finally, this is beyond the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir territory. The camp located on a hillock is allegedly led by Yusuf Azhar. You heard the Foreign Secretary talk about him. He's the brother-in-law of Masood Azhar. Yusuf Azhar was one of the terrorists who had hijacked an Indian Airlines flight in 1999 and was then released in exchange for the hijacked passengers. Now, minutes later, at 3:48 a.m., the Air Force hit a second terror camp in Muzaffarabad and the attack lasted for under 10 minutes. And then came the attack on a third terror camp located in Chakuti at 3:58 a.m. and this lasted till 4:04 a.m. So in just about an hour after this, the Pakistan Defence spokesperson took to Twitter confirming the attacks. But a few hours later came the statement from India's Foreign Secretary at about 11:30 this morning. Now, this airstrike has big implications. This is the first time that the Indian Air Force has crossed the line of control, which was established after the 1971 war with Pakistan. And this also signals a significant policy shift from the Indian government's perspective. Prime Minister Modi met with members of the Cabinet Committee on Security after the pre-dawn airstrikes on the terror camps across the LoC. Now, speaking at a rally in Rajasthan, the Prime Minister, while did not directly refer to the airstrikes, but he did say that the nation is in safe hands. Other opposition leaders have said that they stand by the government and the armed forces.
आओ हम सब भारत के पराक्रमी वीरों को नमन करें, सर झुका करके नमन करें। आज चूरू की धरती से मैं देशवासियों को विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि देश सुरक्षित हाथों में है।
मनेश्वर बसुमतारी जो पुलवामा हमले में शहीद हुए, उनकी भी हम यहां याद करते हैं। और एयरफोर्स के हमारे जो पायलट हैं, उनको हम बधाई देते हैं।
We must congratulate our Air Force. We must show our appreciation for a quick response and a targeted response. And that's how we will send a message to Pakistan and to the terrorist organizations that we are not going to take this lying down.
We stand with the government on this issue. And secondly, Article 51 of UN Charter gives us the right to act in self-defense. And the modern interpretation of Article 51 is that if a country is not able to stop non-state actors, then another country which is a victim of terrorist violence has the right to act in self-defense, which India has done. This is my interpretation.
While political parties standing up for the action by the Indian Air Force. To discuss the implications of the airstrike and the way forward, we're now joined by S.J. Nanodkar, former retired Air Vice Marshal. Also with us, K.C. Singh, former diplomat, Praveen Swami, editor of First Post, and someone who's been tracking terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir for years now. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Praveen Swami, we now have the official statement coming in from Pakistan. We were talking about the response that Pakistan was likely to take. I want you to react to what Pakistan is saying in its statement, rejecting India's claims. And I quote from the statement, the forum strongly rejected Indian claims of targeting an alleged terror camp near Balakot and the claim of heavy casualties. Once again, the Indian government has resorted to self-serving, reckless and fictitious claims. This action has been done for domestic consumption, being an election environment, putting regional peace and stability at grave risk. Is this an indication of Pakistan trying to de-escalate and save itself from embarrassment, given both the location of the camp that was attacked and also the manner in which the airstrike was conducted?
Absolutely, Shereen. I think Pakistan's been trying to downplay the significance and scale of these attacks since the morning, hoping to avoid this escalating into something which it simply cannot afford at this stage. Having said that, in coming days and weeks, the Pakistan armed forces are going to come under savage criticism in their own country for not being able to stop arch enemy India from intruding into their airspace, attacking a target, and heading back unscathed. And that's something we saw after the Abbottabad attacks when the United States took out Osama bin Laden. And now with India having done something, this is going to turn into a huge issue within Pakistan. At that point, we're going to have to watch very carefully as to what the Pakistanis do, what the Pakistani establishment does. There are, as I see it, three options. I've been watching closed WhatsApp groups of retired Pakistan Army generals discussing this amongst themselves. And one sort of line of argument seems to be that Pakistan should step this up, should push the envelope so that the world is obliged to compel and Pakistani deterrence is re-established. A second line of thinking is, why go to war? Why not simply step it up within Kashmir as we did after the 2016 strikes, have more Fidayeen attacks, have more attacks on Indian cities? Okay, the Indians can bomb us once in a while, but we will be inflicting disproportionate costs on them. And the third line, which is even more interesting, is saying, let's do nothing. Our economy is in a mess, our country is in a mess, as we did after the 2001-2002 crisis when Pakistan de-escalated in Kashmir. We should step back, leave Kashmir alone and focus on Pakistan's economy. Now, which of these arguments prevail, I cannot say. But it's interesting to see these three kinds of voices from within the Pakistan armed forces slugging this issue out, debating it, and I'm sure that there'll be more of this in days to come.
Absolutely, there will be more to that. And of course, post that meeting in Pakistan, the Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan stating that Pakistan will decide the time and place of its response. But Praveen, once again, for the benefit of our viewers, if you could explain to us the importance of going after this particular terror camp in Balakot.
Well, this camp isn't significant only because it's a large camp. The Jaish-e-Mohammed has a number of large facilities. It has facilities in the Cholistan Desert, in Bahawalpur, and in Peshawar, in a number of places around Pakistan. But this one has a particular emotional significance for Masood Azhar. Right after he was released in the Indian Airlines hostages for prisoners swap at Kandahar, he went to Balakot, where two of his jihadist heroes from the 19th century were killed in a battle with Maharaja Ranjit Singh's armies. And there he wrote a book called the Fathul Jawad, which is his version of the jihadist verses in the Quran and the ideological basis of the Jaish-e-Mohammed itself. In recent weeks, the Jaish-e-Mohammed has held a number of functions across Pakistan, inviting young men to come to its training camps, and it's had considerable success. There have been large numbers coming. This camp had maybe 100, 150 people. It's hard to say. But here is the hub, if you like, the heart of the Jaish-e-Mohammed's message, and going and hitting it today, hit not just this group's military capability, but its very credibility as an organization. It's like turning to someone and saying, you know, we can hunt you down at your very heart. The fact that it was within Pakistan and not just within occupied Kashmir, of course, carrying an even weightier message that, look, we struck across the line of control, but India is even willing to go deeper and strike within undisputed Pakistani territory if these attacks continue. Prime Minister Modi had said something very interesting in an interview in January. He said, essentially, and I paraphrase, that it would be foolish to expect one surgical strike is going to change Pakistan's behavior. Well, it would be foolish to expect one airstrike will do that. But I think a clear line has been drawn that you cannot, but Pakistan cannot any longer do this without consequence. And that's a really, really important lesson.
I will address that lesson that you raised in just a moment, but let me go across to Ambassador K.C. Singh. Ambassador, what we are also seeing at this point in time post the airstrikes is India continuing to step up its diplomatic efforts to try and explain to the world why this preemptive strike was necessary. We've had the Ministry of External Affairs reaching out to foreign envoys, explaining India's position, and we are going to see Sushma Swaraj reach out to domestic politicians, an all-party meeting being called later this evening to try and explain this to opposition leaders as well. You know, if you look at the comments that came in from President Trump just a few days ago, saying very clearly that India was going to do something big, and at the same time going after Pakistan, saying very clearly that not enough had been done by Pakistan to dismantle terror installations in the country. What is the diplomatic offensive from here on that you expect, and what kind of international force or pressure do you expect now on Pakistan as it prepares its retaliatory response?
Look, this US president is different. I think any of his predecessors by now would have been proactive after the Pulwama attack. This is what they had done in the past. But it's a clear sign that US has lost interest in the region. They want to get out of Afghanistan. They need Pakistan for the dialogue with Taliban, which incidentally has commenced yesterday in Qatar. But at the same time, they are not about to invest more into this situation. And therefore, we are not seeing the same kind of activism, fire engine diplomacy where they come rushing in and say there's a flashpoint and there'll be a nuclear exchange. There's surprisingly little activism on the part of the P5. British have their Brexit, French are busy with their own thing. So you really don't have any fire engine diplomacy taking place. In addition, we've had the Saudi Crown Prince, which are the allies that Pakistan can look to. They're China, Pakistan, to some extent, Emirates, OIC. Now, Emirates have really blown the balloon by inviting Sushma Swaraj to address OIC meeting on March 1 and 2. So she'll be there and all the Islamic countries will be gathered. So the usual instruments that Pakistan used to have to criticize India, go and cry in the OIC forum, make noise, those have been undercut. And I think there's a degree of fatigue globally with this kind of bad behavior which Pakistan has indulged in. And that is why right from 6 o'clock in the morning when DGICPR came up with his first tweet. They're only talking of LoC crossing, shallow penetration, 3-4 miles, dropping off a bomb while escaping. So they're playing to their domestic gallery. Because if indeed it turns out that we've taken out a terrorist camp in Balakot, and the Financial Action Task Force has just taken them to task, saying you continue on the grey list and we'll review your case because you haven't done enough. And they've named the terrorist organization, including Jaish. Then Pakistan's in a mess because in October it will go on the blacklist. That you're having a camp right there. So they are denying that A, there's no camp, so it couldn't be taken out. Now the question is, will we give out the satellite pictures? Will we rub their nose in the... Because here also the problem is, you have an election coming up. Because the opposition will line up behind PM now. But some skepticism will start creeping in over a little while. But if you give out those pictures, then that rubs the Pakistani nose in the ground. And then at that stage, what happens? But what Praveen Swami is saying is correct. It's exactly that kind of debate which must be taking place in Pakistan. That, you know, what do we exactly do? A cost benefit. But one thing has happened, last point, that the whole thing, that the strategic equation has been redrawn. That we are no longer going to function as Pakistan wanted, threatening a nuclear flare-up every time India wanted to escalate. So India has really called their bluff and said, now escalate. And we will see where you go with this.
You're absolutely right, and I'll take both those points forward with Air Vice Marshal Nangutkar. Sir, you know, the point that was raised by both Ambassador K.C. Singh as well as Praveen Swami, that clear lines have been drawn now by India, that there is a strategic redrawing of equations, so to speak. For the first time, India choosing to exercise the option of using the Indian Air Force since 1971. Previously, this option has been considered but never been given the go-ahead. What has changed today with this airstrike, to your mind?
Yes, I think, Shereen, if you recall, during entire Kargil operation, we never crossed LoC, and entire operation was conducted without a single fighter aircraft crossing the border. So, you know, there is a definite shift from then to now, and and I think this is a stage where we can say enough is enough. And we have taken a lot, and I think this is a moment where, if Pakistan today does not learn a lesson and starts meddling around with our sovereignty and our people the way they have been doing in the past, of their philosophy of causing us bleed through 1,000 cuts, I think this is the answer for them to consider seriously their strategy as far as dealing with India is concerned. And what Praveen rightly said, and even Ambassador K.C. Singh has said, that today economically Pakistan can't afford to raise their head the way they have been talking about it. As far as the nuclear threat is concerned, we all understand both nations are have got nuclear arsenal, and you know what is going to be outcome of it. While they have kept their policy very vague, we have a definite answer for that, and we know that we have declared no first use. So all in this entire realm of affair, I think the way the statements since morning have been coming from across the border, first reporting of some incident, thereafter threatening to take stern action, and thereafter a denial that there was any strike of this nature. And I think we have enough proof to give what exactly was happening in these training camps and the other training camps that we have been talking about, and enough proof has been given over a period of time. So I think today's action is a very decisive, very precise action at the right time, decision taken by the present government and executed very well by the Indian Air Force.
You know, speaking of the Indian Air Force, sir, and I want to put that question to you because there's been a lot of discussion around why the Mirage 2000 was used to carry out the airstrike. If you could explain the rationale behind that for our viewers.
See, Mirage 2000 is a very flexible multi-role aircraft. It has a fair bit of capability in all sphere of, employing a fighter platform for these kind of operation. It carries a fair amount of arsenal as far as the strike capability is concerned. It can defend itself very well should there be a requirement to do that. And at the same time, it has adequate avionics to warn of any threat. So in a situation like this, where you have to carry out a strike in a enemy territory, this is one of the very good platforms, and given adequate cover by a aircraft platform like Su-30, which is an air superiority fighter. So it is not one platform that gives the capability in this kind of operation. It is a combination of various platforms. Our electronic early warning aircraft was there up in the air trying to figure out as to what is the reaction from the opposite side. So it's not that only Mirage 2000 has carried out this operation. It's a combination of platform that was employed. Mirage, yes. It is the cutting edge which actually dropped the weapon, but there was a lot happening in the background.
Oh, absolutely. There was a lot else happening in the background as well. But Praveen Swami, if I could go back to you to discuss those three options that you were speaking of. And let's look at the third possibility of Pakistan, as you use the phrase, sucking it up, so to speak. And the context on why Pakistan may be forced to suck it up. We talked about the IMF bailout. Ambassador Singh raised the issue of Pakistan being on the grey list, possibly up for a blacklisting later. If you could explain once again on what the context is which could force Pakistan to step back, given the fact that its economy finds itself in a very precarious position. I mean, domestic compulsions, of course, will have to be considered, but can it afford the war or any retaliatory response, significant retaliatory response? Praveen? I think we've lost that line with Praveen. We'll just reconnect with him. Ambassador Singh, let me put that same question to you, if you heard my question, sir. Given the context today that the economy that Pakistan faces a very, very precarious situation, can it afford to escalate matters?
Well, escalation can be the usual free fire across the thing. I can't imagine the Air Force coming along across the LoC for the simple reason that there are no camps in India, and we have not, as Foreign Secretary emphasized, attacked their military. We have attacked a camp of non-state actors, which shouldn't have been there as per half a dozen UN Security Council Chapter 7 resolutions. So Pakistan was in breach of UN Security Council resolutions, even allowing those camps to be there. So because there's no similar camp in India, what do they attack? Will they attack the people of Jammu and Kashmir, or they start attacking civilian facility? Now, if they had said they have lost civilian life, then they could say, but in any case, they'll alienate the people in the valley. Then you talk of international border. If you go across that, then there is war. So, the options are not very, very clear-cut for them. Because how do they punish? Or it is sub-conventional. And you can't press a button and order another car bomb. It is not that easy. Your forces are on high alert. They would be now prepared for anything of the kind happening. So you can't immediately. So how do they address their public opinion? Is denial. So you go into denial that nothing happened. That is the easiest way to face it, which is a sign of weakness.
Absolutely. Well, that is the position of Pakistan, that there was actually nothing of any significance that has transpired this morning. But Praveen Swami, the question that I was asking you is, if we take the third option, which you phrased sucking it up, so to speak, why would Pakistan be forced to suck it up, even though it has domestic compulsions to cater to? Its economy is on the brink of a virtual collapse, with the IMF bailout being something that Pakistan is working towards. Also, the possibility of moving from the grey list to the blacklist as far as the FATF is concerned. Can Pakistan afford an escalation?
Absolutely not. Rationally, absolutely not. There is no rational case for them to try and step it up. Moreover, I broadly agree with what Ambassador K.C. Singh said, that, you can't dial a suicide bomber. But if Pakistan did want to retaliate, it would make more sense for it to go down the covert route. It's demonstrated, the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Taiba have demonstrated the capacity to hit our cities, to kill our civilians, to engage in acts of terror, which will be far more cost-effective than going to conventional war. But here's the thing. In 2002, when Prime Minister Vajpayee threatened to go to war with Pakistan, mobilized Indian forces along the border, Pakistan actually succeeded in deterring war because of its nuclear weapons, but then backed off in Kashmir for 10 years running. I mean, terrorism almost fell to a zero in Kashmir. And that was for a very simple reason. We know from interviews with General Moinuddin Haider and others that people went to General Musharraf and said, look, this terrorism thing just doesn't pay. Because the Indians respond, it maybe knocks a 0.5% or a 1% of India's GDP, but it completely skewers Pakistan's economy. International organizations aren't willing to come up with aid. The handful of investors we have run away. NRPs, sorry, non-resident Pakistanis don't want to send their remittances home. So you just got to give this jihad game up if you want your economy to function. And I suspect there are probably Pakistani industrialists, businessmen, even well-wishers of the country going to Pakistan's generals and to the Prime Minister and giving that message saying, look, you've just got to stop it. I'd be very surprised, in fact, if the United States and others hadn't been carrying that message to Prime Minister Khan.
Well, let's see whether Pakistan responds to that message. It may not have any choice because, as we pointed out, it requires the capital at this point in time, and the capital is a coward. Will go only where it feels safe. But let me go across to my colleague Parikshit Luthra. The Ministry of External Affairs has launched a series of briefings for foreign diplomats. In fact, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj is scheduled to visit China for the Russia-India-China trilateral meeting. She's also expected to brief Chinese Foreign Minister and the Russian Foreign Minister about the airstrike. Parikshit, tell us more about India's diplomatic efforts. The Chinese envoy reacting, saying that India and Pakistan should exercise restraint.
Interestingly, this entire operation was carried out by the Indian Air Force. But they're not commenting on this strike at all. We spoke to top officials in the Indian Air Force a short while back, and they said that we've left this job to diplomats to send out that message to Pakistan and the international community. So the choice of bureaucrat for that message was extremely important, and that was Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale. As a background to this, we are being told by our sources that the preparation for this airstrike began immediately after the Pulwama attack, and you had the Army, Navy and the Air Force working in close coordination, also with the Intelligence Bureau and the Chief of the RNAW and the NTRO as well. So this was a large joint operation, a coordinated operation that had been going on for the last 10 days. The diplomatic groundwork was also being laid by the Ministry of External Affairs. We know how the Foreign Secretary met about 25 envoys, including the Chinese envoy. We saw the strong statement at the UN Security Council, and sources telling us that this airstrike is in a way a conclusion of that. The statement also issued very carefully worded, using words like preemptive strike, in self-defense, non-military strike. So they are trying to send out a message that this was a campaign against terror, and this was not targeted against civilians or a military installation in Pakistan. So clearly avoiding any provocation. And when that meeting with the foreign envoys took place at the Ministry of External Affairs, this is exactly what the Foreign Secretary told them, that this was India's fight against terror groups in Pakistan, because Pakistan is not able to fight against them, and there is a threat to India. There is credible evidence that there could be such attacks in other parts of the country. That's why it was important to go in and carry out this attack in self-defense.
Absolutely. Measured response coming in from the Ministry of External Affairs. Let me get wrap-up comments from each one of our guests. Air Vice Marshal, I'll start by asking you, what is it that you will be watching out for from here on? 10 seconds, sir.
Yeah, now is the time to make sure that whatever Pakistan does under the garb of, India not attacking anything within the Pakistani territory is something that we will have to watch for. We will have to keep our defenses absolutely, on highest possible alert. and build up our forces to take on any eventuality that we have to face tomorrow. And internal security, homeland security is of utmost importance at this stage. And I think that is what people in both in Home Ministry and this thing. Of course, diplomatic activity will carry on.
Sure. So homeland security needs to be prioritized as well. Ambassador Singh, final comments, sir.
We are just about to enter into a very subtle, critical phase in India because the Lok Sabha elections will be just about 2 months away, and you'll have a code of conduct, etc. So basically the government will have other priorities. But the best advice to the government will be, please don't chest thump, don't use this domestically beyond a point, because then you may just have some irrational reaction. And wars start when countries do not necessarily, or leaderships do not necessarily behave on rational basis, or they misassess the other country's intentions or other country's capabilities. So it would be a time to really, if Pakistan backs off, not really rub their nose in the ground beyond a point, but remain alert.
Praveen Swami, I'll give you the final word.
Thank you. I think it's highly probable that the Jaish-e-Mohammed and other jihadi groups will try and respond to this attack, either by attacks on military targets in Jammu and Kashmir or tragically civilians in our cities. And I couldn't agree more with the other panelists that we really need to be on the watch for this. But more important than being on the watch for this is, in the middle of an election cycle, the government needs to be really clear about how it's going to deliver punishment if this terror option is exercised, because if there's one thing that will bring about a change in Pakistan's behavior, it's a consistency in the consequences for their actions. This cannot be a one-off thing. It has to be a sustained policy, and I hope we have the political resolve and will to do it in the middle of a bruising, busy election cycle.
Well, gentlemen, lots of food for thought there, and thank you very much for joining us and explaining to us the implications of the airstrike conducted by India today and what options both sides will have to weigh very carefully. Time for hopefully rational thinking. Praveen Swami, Air Vice Marshal Nanodkar and Ambassador K.C. Singh, my colleague Parikshit Luthra, many thanks for joining us. We'll take a quick break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere.